Sometimes innovation that's pulled off successfully is not appreciated and eventually becomes a cult classic. Games like the Dragon Warrior series in the US, Shenmue for the Dreamcast, and so on. Well, today we are going to take a look at one such game in River City Ransom for the NES. River City Ransom, or Downtown Neketsu Monogatari in Japan, is a very unique game. It blends elements of an RPG game and a beat-em-up style game. It's like a blend of Double Dragon and the later Final Fantasy II game. More on that later. The game was originally developed by Technos, published by American Technos, and released in 1985. This was the third in the Kunio-kun series released in North America, with the two previous being Super Dodgeball and Renegade. The game would receive cult status and eventually be remade for GBA in 2003. Personally, I will get to that game eventually, but not this time around. There was also a Kickstarter for a River City Ransom game called River City Ransom Underground. It raised more than $250,000, and I was surprised I never caught wind of it. Good job on it, because this game looks awesome and reminds me of the Sky Pilgrim vs. the World game that came out not too long ago. As for Technos, we all know them by now. Their resume includes development of games like the Double Dragon games, Nintendo World Cup, Crash and the Boys, and Super Strike Volleyball. Most of these games are considered more or less cult classics with the exception of Double Dragon. Double Dragon, along with other games such as River City Ransom, helped build up the beat-em-up genre in the late 80s and early 90s. Then again, as soon as the Double Dragon fighting games came out, the series fell off the face of the planet until Double Dragon Neon came out, which was short-lived when Double Dragon 2 won Birds of Fate was released and killed any hope of being a decent franchise, and probably any chance of seeing a Double Dragon Neon 3. Back to the game itself. The plot, like any early NES game, is pretty basic. What it amounts to is the boss of the biggest gang in high school has kidnapped your girlfriend, and it's your job with your best friend to go rescue her. Not exactly Shakespeare, but gives you enough motivation to play through the game if you're between the ages of 8 and 15 years old at the time. The graphics are fairly solid for a 1985 NES game. The town that River City Ransom is set in is fairly open-ended for a 1985 game. Levels are explorable and there's some alternative pathways. Alternative as in that there is a place you can go into at some point, find a dead end. This is not a bad thing at all. This means that it only adds how innovative the level design was for 1985. It's not just going from point A to point B, but you can enter places to see new levels, and it expands the size of the game. Speaking of which, sections between levels are big. This is mainly due to smaller character sprites, but there is a lot of detail in the game. Yes, it can look repetitive at times, but for a 1985 game, it looks incredible. This game caused frame rate and flickering sprites. The slowdown isn't so bad when you play alone, but when you play the two-player mode, it gets bad. I don't know if it's the original 5, but it chugs when fights start to have any kind of intensity. This is only amplified when playing the two-player mode. It slows down to such a pace that with other element, it makes it at times pretty well pointless to play the co-op mode. As for sprite flickering, it's not as bad as other games from the time, but it can lead to cheap hits. It's something you have to get used to when you play these early NES games. Also, for those who don't know, sprite flickering was one of the methods used to keep the game running smoothly while keeping the quality of the game's graphics. In this case, it worked to pretty well mediocre effect, as there was still significant slowdown. The audio is fairly well done. Sound effects are iconic, with some of them being used in later games such as Double Dragon. Even now, they're still solid and almost never get old. The music is also classic 1985 music. It fits the style of the game and only adds to fights. Like, really, just look up the soundtrack to get what I mean when I say by that. Plus, near the end of the game, it uses a track that would be the opening theme for Double Dragon, which kind of shows you how cool the actual soundtrack of this game was. The gameplay has aged fairly well for a 1985 game. When you are considering an era, this is a fun and unique RPG style beat 'em up. First and foremost, the controls are awesome. You could emulate and use an original Xbox D-pad and it would still feel pretty solid. Moving around feels tight and going from running to walking feels fluid. The only time you'll be burned by the controls is when you have to jump. This is more of a hit detection problem than with the controls themselves, so I'll give that a bit of a pass. As for the combat itself, it hasn't aged as well as other NES classics such as Double Dragon 2 The Revenge. That's not a bad thing, both games are classic. It's just that Double Dragon 2 is more refined. It's like comparing the early career of a guy like Tom Brady to him now, when he won the 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. Yes, we did start to see the greatness, but those rings look so much better over time. The RPG elements are very unique. You don't level up like in Dragon Warrior where you get level ups for fighting enemies. You eat food, read books, or other sort of actions to increase stats. The only thing is that the game doesn't tell you what each action does. So be sure to take notes on what items you want to buy so you level up the stats that you actually want to level up. Where its only fault is that you either need a walkthrough, prior knowledge of this era of game, or manual. If you ever played games like Tunes and Treasures, Dragon Warrior, or other adventure games, you know these games give you little to no direction at all. You'll get lost or find a choke point a few times finding your way around through this game. This is only if you don't have any help at all, but eventually you'll exhaust every option or every possible method of getting around and get it and get right through this game. That or go fuck this and try to walk through. So if you don't have the patience for this era of the game, then you'll more often than not have, a fair bit of frustration at dawn with the gameplay. Probably my biggest hindrance is that 2-player mode is more of a hindrance than a bonus. There was a few games around this time that instead of having no friendly fire, you could do damage to your buddies and yourself by accident. Games like Battletoads had this feature and only seemed to serve as a method to make the game harder. This is another one of them. This is remedied by allowing you to attack your opponents with your friends and allowing your friend to run back to town to revive you. The problem is that, well, you don't always lose half your money, but if your buddy dies while he's still flickering on screen, you run off stage, and this is actually an exploit I found in the game, and you will get healed to full health, and none of your money's been jacked. Add on the consistent slowdown, and you got a game that gave me really no reason to go play the 2-player mode at all, aside from, just saying, hey, I beat it on the 2-player mode. If it ran better, then I could see myself finishing it with Brother, easier than anything. But for now, I just don't see it happening right at this very moment. Not to mention, you don't share money. Whoever gets the kill, your buddy can go and swoop and grab that cash. There are a few other hiccups like the 33 character on passwords with confusing text, but this doesn't matter when you consider when the game came out. This is still a solid and ambitious beat 'em up that's worth checking out for the NES. Overall, River City Ransom is a great game. This laid some of the foundation that games like Final Fight and Streets of Rage built off of. The game on the NES can also get somewhat expensive. My brother picked up his copy for about 45 Canadian, and might go for more based off condition. If you find it on Virtual Console or in the wild, then give it a shot. It's a cult classic and buried treasure in my books. And I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Really solid game. Still had a lot of fun with the multiplayer. Single player still really solid, fun beat 'em up to go back and play. And at times I would argue that it is better than some of the other Double Dragon games that came out.